There is a moment that comes to many people at some point in their lives. It doesn't happen loudly. It doesn't arrive with warning. But when it happens, it changes the way they see everything. Sometimes it happens late at night, when the world is quiet and there is finally space to think. Sometimes it happens during a conversation with an old friend, when memories of the past suddenly feel much closer than they used to. And sometimes it happens when someone looks back on their life and realizes that time has moved much faster than they ever imagined. In that moment, a strange thought appears. A thought that many people never considered when they were younger. What if I spent too much time chasing the wrong things? At first, the thought feels uncomfortable. After all, most people spend years working hard, making plans, trying to build a life that they believe will make them happy. They chase goals. They pursue success. They worry about what others think. They believe that if they just work a little harder, achieve a little more, and prove themselves a little further, everything will eventually fall into place. But the longer people live, the more they begin to notice something surprising. Many of the things that once seemed incredibly important slowly begin to lose their importance. The things they worried about the most rarely mattered in the long run. The approval they once tried so hard to earn no longer feels necessary. And the moments they once rushed through suddenly become the ones they wish they could experience again. This realization does not come from failure. In fact, many people who experience it have achieved things they once dreamed about. They have built careers. They have earned money. They have reached milestones that once felt very far away. Yet when they pause and look back, they notice something that no one warned them about. Life did not unfold the way they expected. Not because it went wrong, but because the things that truly mattered were never the things they spent the most time chasing. Think about the way most people spend their early years. They are taught to compete, to prove themselves, to move forward faster than everyone else. School teaches them to chase grades. Work teaches them to chase promotions. Society teaches them to chase status. And without realizing it, many people build their lives around a single assumption: that success will eventually lead to fulfillment. But life has a quiet way of challenging that assumption. Because as the years pass, something unexpected begins to happen. People start noticing the moments they missed. They remember the evenings they were too busy to spend with family. The friendships that slowly faded because life became too crowded. The passions they once loved but eventually abandoned in the pursuit of something more practical. And suddenly, the idea of success begins to look different. Because success is not only about what you achieve. It is also about what you experience while you are achieving it. It is about the people you walk the journey with. It is about the memories you create along the way. It is about whether the life you are building actually feels meaningful. The difficult truth is that many people do not think about these things until much later. When time has already passed. When opportunities have already changed. When life has already moved forward. That is why some of the most powerful lessons about life are often discovered too late. Not because they were hidden, but because people were too busy looking in the wrong direction. They were focused on the future so intensely that they forgot to notice the present. They were chasing achievements so relentlessly that they forgot to appreciate the moments that were quietly passing by. And one day, they looked back and realized something simple but profound. Life was never only about reaching the destination. It was about how they lived during the journey. The good news is that these realizations do not need to come at the end of life. They can come now. They can come in moments of reflection like this one. Because the truth is, the lessons that most people discover too late are lessons that can change everything if they are understood earlier. They can change the way you spend your time, the way you value relationships, the way you think about success, and most importantly, the way you choose to live each day. In this video, we are going to explore some of the truths that many people only recognize after years of experience. Truths about time, truths about worry, truths about relationships, truths about living a life that actually matters. These are the lessons that countless people eventually realize when they look back on their lives. But the most powerful thing about these lessons is this. You do not have to wait decades to understand them. You can understand them now. And once you do, the way you live your life may never look the same again. Because sometimes the greatest wisdom in life is not learning something new. It is realizing something important, while there is still time to live differently. And the first realization that changes everything is something many people only understand much later in life. It is the realization that time is far more valuable than money. When people are young, time feels almost invisible. It stretches endlessly into the future, creating the illusion that there is always more of it. More time to try new things. More time to fix mistakes. More time to reconnect with people. More time to live the life they keep postponing. Because of this, many people make a quiet but powerful trade without even realizing it. They trade their time for things they believe will matter more. They trade it for money, for status, for recognition, for a version of success that promises happiness later. At first, this trade feels reasonable. After all, money is important. It provides comfort. It creates opportunities. It offers a sense of security. So people work harder. They take on more responsibilities. They tell themselves that the long hours, the stress, and the sacrifices are temporary. This is just for now. I'll slow down later. I'll enjoy life once I reach this goal. And for a while, this mindset feels productive. Progress is being made. Goals are getting closer. Life seems to be moving forward. But something subtle begins to happen over time. The later they keep talking about never quite arrives. Because every time they reach a goal, a new one appears. Every time they achieve something, expectations grow. Every time they think about slowing down, life feels too busy to allow it. So they continue trading their time, day after day, year after year, until one day, something changes. It might be a moment of reflection, a quiet realization, or even a sudden event that forces them to pause. And in that moment, they begin to see time differently. They realize that time was never just something they had plenty of. It was something they were constantly spending. Every hour they worked late. Every moment they postponed. Every experience they delayed. It was all part of a transaction. And unlike money, time does not come back. You can lose money and earn it again. You can fail and rebuild. You can start over in many areas of life. But time moves in only one direction. Once it passes, it becomes memory. Nothing more. This realization often brings a quiet but powerful shift in perspective. Things that once felt urgent begin to feel less important. Things that were once ignored begin to feel incredibly valuable. People start thinking about the moments they missed, the conversations they didn't have, the opportunities they postponed, the simple experiences they rushed through without fully appreciating. And suddenly, the definition of wealth begins to change. Wealth is no longer just about what you own. It becomes about how you spend your time. It becomes about the freedom to choose how you live each day. It becomes about the ability to be present in moments that actually matter. This is why some of the happiest people are not always the ones with the most money. They are often the ones who have learned how to use their time well. They invest their time in relationships. They create meaningful experiences. They allow themselves to enjoy the present instead of constantly chasing the future. But this understanding rarely comes early. Because when people are young, the future feels more important than the present. They believe that happiness is something they will achieve later, after they succeed, after they prove themselves, after they reach a certain point. But life has a way of revealing a different truth. Happiness is not something that magically appears at the end of a long journey. It is something that is experienced along the way. It is found in the small moments that people often overlook. A conversation with someone who understands you. A quiet moment of peace after a long day. A simple experience that brings genuine joy. These moments may seem ordinary, but they are what life is actually made of. And when people rush through them, constantly focused on what comes next, they miss the very thing they are trying to build. This is one of the greatest regrets many people express later in life. Not that they didn't achieve enough, but that they didn't fully experience the life they were living. They were always preparing for something else, always thinking about the next step, always waiting for the right moment to slow down and enjoy life. But the right moment never came, because they never created it. Time does not slow down on its own. It continues moving, whether we notice it or not. And the longer people wait to appreciate it, the faster it seems to disappear. This is why understanding the value of time early in life is so powerful. It changes priorities. It changes decisions. It changes the way people approach their daily lives. Instead of asking, "How can I earn more?" they begin asking, "How do I want to spend my time?" Instead of constantly delaying life, they begin living it more intentionally. Instead of sacrificing everything for the future, they start balancing the present with what lies ahead. This does not mean abandoning ambition or refusing to work hard. It means understanding that success should not come at the cost of life itself. Because what is the point of building a life that you never have time to live? What is the point of achieving goals if you miss the experiences that make those achievements meaningful? Time is the foundation of everything. Every relationship exists within it. Every memory is created within it. Every experience depends on it. And once it passes, it cannot be reclaimed. This is why people who have experienced loss, change, or the passing of time often see life differently. They become more present, more aware, more appreciative of the moments they once overlooked, because they understand something that many people are still too busy to notice. That life is not something that happens later. It is happening now. And the way you spend your time today is shaping the life you will eventually look back on. The question is not whether time will pass. It always will. The real question is how you will use it while you still can. Because one day, like so many others, you may look back and realize something simple but powerful. That time was never just a resource. It was your life. And the second realization that changes everything is something that affects almost every moment of that life. It is the realization that most of the things people worry about never truly matter. If there is one habit that quietly consumes more time, energy, and peace than almost anything else, it is worry. Not the kind of thinking that helps you solve problems. Not the kind of planning that prepares you for the future. But the kind of worry that loops endlessly in your mind without ever leading to anything useful. The kind that keeps you awake at night. The kind that makes small problems feel bigger than they really are. The kind that convinces you something is wrong, even when nothing has actually happened. What makes worry so powerful is that it often feels important. It feels responsible. It feels like you are being careful, prepared, and aware. But over time, many people begin to realize something surprising. A large percentage of the things they worried about never actually happened. And the things that did happen were rarely as bad as they imagined. Think about how often people worry about what others think of them. They replay conversations in their minds. They analyze every word they said. They imagine how they were perceived. They fear being judged, misunderstood, or criticized. But the truth is, most people are far too focused on their own lives to spend much time thinking about someone else. While one person is worrying about how they were perceived, the other person is likely thinking about their own concerns, their own challenges, their own next steps. This creates a strange situation. People spend hours worrying about judgments that rarely exist. They hold themselves back from expressing their true thoughts. They hesitate to take risks. They avoid opportunities that might expose them to criticism, all because of fears that live almost entirely in their own minds. Another common source of worry is the fear of making mistakes. People hesitate to start something new because they are afraid of failing. They delay decisions because they want to avoid choosing the wrong path. They overanalyze every possible outcome, hoping to eliminate risk completely. But life does not work that way. There is no path without uncertainty, no decision without risk, and no progress without the possibility of failure. When people look back on their lives, they rarely regret the mistakes they made as much as they regret the chances they never took, the opportunities they avoided, the ideas they never pursued, the moments they allowed fear to stop them. Because mistakes, in most cases, can be corrected. They become lessons. They create growth. They lead to new understanding. But missed opportunities often remain exactly that. Missed. And the more time passes, the harder it becomes to return to them. Worry also has a way of distorting reality. When people spend too much time thinking about worst-case scenarios, those scenarios begin to feel more real than they actually are. A small problem becomes a major threat. A simple mistake becomes a defining failure. An uncertain future becomes something to fear rather than something to explore. This distortion affects not only how people think, but also how they act. They become more cautious, more hesitant, more likely to avoid situations that could lead to growth. And over time, this avoidance creates a life that feels smaller than it could have been. A life shaped more by fear than by possibility. But perhaps the most important realization about worry is this. It rarely changes the outcome. Worry does not prevent problems from happening. It does not control the future. It does not guarantee better results. What it does do is consume the present. It takes time that could be used productively. It drains energy that could be directed toward meaningful action. It replaces peace with tension. And it creates a constant sense of pressure that makes life feel heavier than it needs to be. This is why many people, as they grow older, begin to view worry very differently. They realize that the energy they spent worrying could have been used in better ways. They could have taken action instead of overthinking. They could have enjoyed moments instead of analyzing them. They could have trusted themselves instead of constantly doubting. And once this realization becomes clear, something begins to shift. They start letting go of unnecessary worry. Not completely, because some level of concern is natural. But they begin to recognize the difference between useful thinking and destructive overthinking. They begin asking better questions. Instead of what if everything goes wrong, they ask, what can I do right now? Instead of what will people think, they ask, what do I actually believe? Instead of imagining endless negative outcomes, they focus on the next step they can take. This shift is powerful because it brings attention back to the present. And the present is the only place where anything can actually change. It is the only place where decisions are made, where actions happen, where progress begins. The future is shaped by what is done today, not by what is feared tomorrow. This does not mean ignoring potential problems or pretending everything will always go well. It means approaching life with a different mindset, a mindset that values action over anxiety, clarity over confusion, presence over fear. Because in the end, most of the things people worry about never truly matter. They fade away. They resolve themselves, or they turn out to be far less significant than expected. But the time spent worrying about them is gone. And that is what many people realize too late, that they gave too much of their life to things that did not deserve it. They allowed fear to occupy space that could have been filled with experience. They allowed doubt to replace confidence. They allowed worry to overshadow moments that could have been meaningful. But once this truth is understood, something important becomes possible. Freedom. The freedom to act without overthinking every outcome. The freedom to speak without fearing every judgment. The freedom to live without constantly imagining what could go wrong. And with that freedom, life begins to feel different. Lighter, clearer, more open. Because when worry loses its control, something else begins to grow in its place. Confidence. And that confidence allows people to focus on what truly matters. Not the opinions of everyone around them, but the people who actually make life meaningful. Which leads to the next realization, that in the end, it is not achievements that define a meaningful life. It is the people you share it with. For most of life, people are taught to focus on achievement. From a young age, the message is clear. Work hard, succeed, stand out, become something impressive. And for many people, this becomes the foundation of how they define their worth. They measure their progress through results, through milestones, through recognition, through how far ahead they appear compared to others. At first, this way of thinking feels motivating. It gives direction. It creates goals. It pushes people to improve. But over time, something subtle begins to change. As people move forward, achieving more and more, they begin to notice something they didn't expect. Achievement, on its own, does not create lasting fulfillment. It creates moments of satisfaction, moments of pride, moments where everything feels like it was worth it. But those moments are often temporary. The feeling fades, the excitement passes, and eventually, people find themselves chasing the next goal, the next milestone, the next version of success. But while they are busy chasing these things, something else is quietly happening. Life is moving forward. Relationships are evolving. People are changing. And the time they could have spent building meaningful connections is slowly being replaced by time spent pursuing achievements. This is why many people, when they look back on their lives, don't talk about their accomplishments as much as you might expect. They don't talk about how many hours they worked. They don't talk about how many awards they received. They don't talk about how many goals they completed. Instead, they talk about people. They remember the conversations that meant something, the moments they shared with family, the friendships that shaped their lives, the people who supported them when things were difficult. Because at the end of the day, achievements are experiences you go through, but relationships are experiences you share. And that difference changes everything. Think about a moment of success, a promotion, a major accomplishment, a goal you worked toward for years. Now imagine experiencing that moment completely alone. No one to share it with, no one to celebrate with, no one who truly understands what it meant to you. The moment would still matter, but it would feel incomplete. Because human beings are not meant to experience life in isolation. They are meant to connect, to share, to build relationships that give meaning to everything else. This is something many people begin to realize later in life. Not because they didn't value relationships, but because they didn't realize how much those relationships needed their time and attention. Relationships do not grow automatically. They require presence. They require effort. They require moments of undivided attention in a world that is constantly trying to pull focus away. And when those moments are consistently replaced with work, ambition, and distraction, something begins to fade. Conversations become less frequent. Connections become weaker. People drift apart, not because they want to, but because life becomes too busy, too full, too focused on things that feel urgent but are not always important. This is why some of the most common regrets people express are not about failure. They are about distance. I wish I had spent more time with my family. I wish I had stayed in touch with that friend. I wish I had been more present when it mattered. These regrets do not come from a lack of achievement. They come from a lack of connection. Because while achievements can always be replaced or surpassed, relationships are different. They are built over time. They are shaped by shared experiences. And once that time passes, it cannot always be recreated. This realization changes the way people begin to see success. Success is no longer just about what you accomplish. It becomes about who you share your life with. It becomes about the quality of your relationships, the depth of your connections, the people who are there not just when things are going well, but also when they are not. And this understanding brings clarity. It reveals that some of the most valuable investments in life are not financial. They are relational. Spending time with people who matter, listening without distraction, being present without thinking about what comes next. These actions may seem small in the moment, but over time, they create something powerful. Trust, connection, a sense of belonging. And these are the things that make life feel meaningful. Another important aspect of this realization is understanding that not all relationships are equal. Some people add value to your life. They support you. They understand you. They encourage you to grow. Others may bring negativity. They drain your energy. They create stress rather than peace. Learning to recognize this difference is part of what allows people to build a life that feels balanced and fulfilling. Because relationships are not just about quantity. They are about quality. A few meaningful connections are often far more valuable than many shallow ones. This is something that becomes clearer with time. As people grow older, they often find themselves focusing less on trying to maintain a large circle and more on nurturing the relationships that truly matter. They begin to appreciate depth over appearance, connection over impression, authenticity over approval. And this shift brings a different kind of satisfaction, a quieter, more lasting sense of fulfillment. Because while achievements can be admired from a distance, relationships are felt up close. They are experienced in everyday moments, in conversations, in shared experiences, in the simple presence of another person who understands you. This is why, at the end of life, people rarely measure their success by what they accumulated. They measure it by what they experienced with others, by the love they gave, by the relationships they built, by the people who were part of their journey. And this does not mean that achievement is unimportant. It has its place. It creates opportunities. It provides stability. It allows people to build and create. But without meaningful relationships, it often feels incomplete. Because success without connection can feel empty. But connection, even without extraordinary success, can feel deeply fulfilling. This is one of the most powerful truths people come to understand over time. That the value of life is not just found in what you achieve. It is found in who you become and who you share that journey with. And once this realization becomes clear, priorities begin to shift. Time is no longer spent only on chasing goals. It is also invested in building relationships, in being present, in creating moments that will actually matter when life is looked back upon. Because in the end, the people in your life are not just part of your story. They are the reason your story matters. And yet, despite understanding the importance of relationships, many people still struggle with something that quietly interferes with how they live. A need to be accepted, a need to be approved, a need to make everyone around them happy, which leads to the next realization, that trying to please everyone is a game no one can win. At some point in life, most people develop a quiet habit, a habit that seems harmless at first, even admirable. They begin adjusting themselves to fit the expectations of others. They become more careful with what they say, more aware of how they are perceived, more willing to change their behavior to avoid conflict, criticism, or rejection. This habit often starts early. People learn that being liked feels good. Being accepted creates comfort. Being approved of brings a sense of security. So they begin to shape themselves in ways that increase those chances. They say yes when they want to say no. They agree when they actually feel differently. They hold back opinions that might create disagreement. They choose what feels safe over what feels true. At first, this approach seems to work. They avoid conflict. They maintain peace. They appear agreeable, easy to be around, and supportive. But over time, something begins to shift beneath the surface. Because every time someone ignores their own thoughts, feelings, or needs to satisfy others, they make a small trade. They trade authenticity for approval. And while approval can feel good in the moment, it does not create long-term fulfillment. In fact, the more people rely on it, the more dependent they become on external validation. They begin to measure themselves based on how others respond. If they are praised, they feel confident. If they are criticized, they begin to doubt themselves. If they are accepted, they feel secure. If they are rejected, they feel uncertain. This creates a fragile sense of identity, one that constantly shifts depending on the reactions of others. And because of this, life begins to feel like a performance, a constant effort to say the right thing, do the right thing, be the right version of themselves for every situation. But there is a problem with this approach. It is impossible to satisfy everyone. No matter how carefully someone adjusts themselves, there will always be different expectations, different opinions, different preferences. One person may appreciate something while another criticizes it. One group may accept you while another questions you. And trying to meet all of these expectations at once leads to something exhausting, a life without a clear sense of self. This is why many people eventually reach a point where they feel lost. Not because they lack direction, but because they have spent so much time adapting to others that they are no longer sure who they truly are. They have become experts at fitting in, but in the process, they have lost connection with what they actually think, want, and believe. This realization often comes gradually, through moments of frustration, moments where saying yes feels heavy, moments where going along with something feels wrong, moments where they realize they are living a life that looks acceptable on the outside but feels disconnected on the inside. And when this realization becomes clear, it leads to an important question. What would my life look like if I stopped trying to please everyone? At first, this question can feel uncomfortable because it introduces the possibility of conflict, of disagreement, of being misunderstood. But it also introduces something else. Freedom. The freedom to express honest thoughts. The freedom to make decisions based on personal values rather than external expectations. The freedom to live in a way that feels aligned instead of constantly adjusted. This does not mean becoming selfish or ignoring others completely. Relationships still require compromise, understanding, respect. But there is a difference between healthy compromise and constant self-sacrifice. Healthy compromise allows both sides to be heard. Constant self-sacrifice silences one side completely. And when that pattern continues for too long, it leads to resentment. Because deep down, people know when they are not being true to themselves. They feel it in the decisions they make, in the things they agree to, in the opportunities they pass on. Over time, this creates a quiet frustration, a sense that life is being lived according to someone else's expectations rather than personal intention. This is why many people, later in life, begin to change the way they approach this habit. They start setting boundaries. They start saying no when something does not feel right. They start expressing their thoughts more openly, even if it means facing disagreement. And something interesting begins to happen. Not everyone approves. Not everyone agrees. Some people may even react negatively. But at the same time, something else becomes stronger. Clarity. Because when people stop trying to please everyone, they begin to understand themselves more clearly. They begin to see what they truly value, what they genuinely care about, what kind of life they actually want to build. And this clarity leads to a different kind of confidence. Not the kind that comes from external validation, but the kind that comes from internal alignment, from knowing that the way you are living reflects who you truly are. This shift also changes the way relationships function. Because when someone is no longer trying to be everything to everyone, the relationships that remain tend to become more genuine, more honest, more meaningful, because they are no longer based on performance. They are based on authenticity. And while this may lead to fewer connections, it often leads to better ones. Connections that are built on understanding rather than approval, on acceptance rather than expectation, on truth rather than adjustment. This is something many people only fully understand after years of experience. After realizing how much energy they spent trying to meet expectations that were constantly changing. After noticing how exhausting it was to maintain a version of themselves that was never entirely real. After recognizing that no matter how much they tried, they could never fully control how others perceive them. And once this realization settles in, something shifts. The need for constant approval begins to fade. The pressure to be perfect begins to lessen. The fear of judgment begins to lose its intensity. Because they understand something simple but powerful. That living a life based on other people's expectations will never lead to true fulfillment. Only living in alignment with who you are can do that. And this does not mean that life becomes easier. There will still be challenges. There will still be moments of doubt. There will still be situations where choices are difficult. But there is a difference between a difficult life that is true and a comfortable life that feels empty. And most people, once they see that difference, choose truth. Because at the end of the day, the goal is not to be accepted by everyone. It is to live a life that feels real. A life that reflects your values, your beliefs, your direction. And when that becomes the focus, something important begins to happen. Life becomes less about external pressure and more about internal clarity. Less about trying to fit in and more about understanding where you truly belong. And this clarity becomes even more important when people begin to recognize something else that often goes unnoticed for too long. That life is moving much faster than they ever expected. There is a strange illusion that most people live with for a long time. It is the feeling that there is still plenty of time. Plenty of time to figure things out. Plenty of time to take action. Plenty of time to become the person they want to be. When people are young, this feeling is especially strong. Days feel long. Years feel slow. The future feels distant. It creates a sense of comfort. A belief that life is something that will fully begin later. Later, when things are more stable. Later, when responsibilities are handled. Later, when the right moment finally arrives. So people wait. They delay decisions. They postpone dreams. They tell themselves that they will start living fully at some point in the future. But what many people don't realize is that time does not move the same way forever. Something changes as life goes on. The years begin to feel shorter. Time seems to accelerate. Moments that once felt distant begin to arrive much faster than expected. And suddenly, people start noticing things they never paid attention to before. They see how quickly weeks turn into months. How months turn into years. How entire phases of life seem to pass in what feels like a short period of time. This shift is subtle at first, but once it becomes noticeable, it is impossible to ignore. Because it brings with it a realization that can feel both surprising and unsettling. Life is not moving slowly. It is moving quickly, much faster than they thought. And the longer people wait to truly live, the more they begin to feel like time is slipping away. This is why many people, at different stages of life, experience moments of reflection. Moments where they pause and think, where did all the time go? It can happen when they see how much they have changed. When they notice how others have changed. When they realize that things they once considered recent actually happened years ago. And in those moments, something becomes clear. Life does not wait for the perfect time. It keeps moving forward. Whether people are ready or not. Whether they are paying attention or not. Whether they are fully living or simply going through the motions. And this is where one of the most important realizations begins to form. If life is moving this fast, then waiting for the right moment can mean missing the moment entirely. Because the idea of a perfect time is often an illusion. There will always be responsibilities. There will always be uncertainty. There will always be reasons to delay. But if people continue to wait for everything to align perfectly, they may find that time continues to pass without them ever fully stepping into the life they imagined. This does not mean acting impulsively or without thought. It means recognizing that action does not need to be delayed indefinitely. It means understanding that small steps taken now are more powerful than perfect plans that never begin. It means realizing that life is not something that should be constantly postponed. Another aspect of this realization is how quickly moments change. People often assume that certain things will always be there, that relationships will remain the same, that opportunities will still exist later, that there will always be another chance. But life does not guarantee that. People move. Circumstances change. Situations evolve. And what feels permanent today may not be there tomorrow. This is why moments that seem ordinary at the time often become meaningful in hindsight. A simple conversation, a shared experience, a quiet moment of connection. These things may not stand out in the moment, But as time passes, they become memories. And sometimes, they become memories that people wish they had valued more when they were happening. This is one of the reasons why presence becomes so important. Being present does not mean ignoring the future. It means fully experiencing what is happening now instead of constantly thinking about what comes next. Because when people are always focused on the future, they miss the present. And when the present becomes the past, they realize that those moments were part of the life they were trying to build all along. Another important shift that comes with this realization is how people view priorities. When time feels endless, it is easy to treat it casually, to assume there will always be more, to delay things that matter. But when people begin to understand how quickly life moves, their priorities begin to change. They become more intentional with their time, more selective about how they spend it, more aware of what truly deserves their attention. They begin to ask different questions. Instead of what should I do next, they ask, what actually matters? Instead of how can I fill my time, they ask, how do I want to use my time? And these questions lead to different choices. Choices that are not just based on habit or expectation, but on meaning. This does not mean life becomes perfect or completely clear. There will still be uncertainty. There will still be moments of doubt. There will still be challenges. But there is a difference between moving through life unconsciously and moving through it with awareness. Awareness brings intention, and intention brings direction. It allows people to live in a way that feels more aligned with what they truly want. Instead of constantly reacting to circumstances, they begin to make conscious decisions about how they spend their time. Because they understand something that many people realize too late. That time is not just passing. It is being used. Every day, every hour, every moment. And the way it is used determines the life that is eventually created. This realization does not need to create fear. It does not need to create pressure. Instead, it can create clarity. Clarity about what is worth focusing on. Clarity about what can be let go. Clarity about what truly matters. Because when people understand how quickly life moves, they begin to live differently. They become more present, more intentional, more aware of the value of each moment. And with that awareness, they are able to create a life that feels fuller, not because it is longer, but because it is lived more deeply. And when all of these realizations come together, about time, worry, relationships, and authenticity, they lead to one final understanding. An understanding that has the power to change everything, if it is embraced early enough. That the life most people wish they had is often built from the choices they can start making today. At some point, all of these realizations begin to come together, not as separate ideas, but as one clear understanding, a quiet clarity that changes the way life is seen. Time is limited. Worry is often unnecessary. Relationships are what truly matter. Trying to please everyone leads nowhere. And life moves faster than we expect. Individually, each of these truths is powerful. But together, they reveal something deeper. They reveal that the life most people are trying to build is often already within reach. It is not something that only exists in the future. It is something that is shaped by the way each day is lived. This is where the biggest shift happens. Because many people spend years thinking that life will finally feel meaningful once certain conditions are met. Once they succeed. Once they feel secure. Once everything falls into place. But the reality is, those conditions are always moving. There is always another goal. Another level. Another expectation. And if meaning is always tied to what comes next, it is never fully experienced in the present. This is why so many people, later in life, look back and feel a sense of disconnect. Not because their lives were empty, but because they were so focused on reaching a future version of life that they never fully lived the one they were in. They were always preparing, always planning, always waiting. And in the process, they missed moments that could have been meaningful. Moments that, once passed, cannot be returned to. But here is the part that changes everything. You do not have to follow that same path. You do not have to wait until years have passed to understand what truly matters. You do not have to learn these lessons through regret. Because awareness changes the timeline. The moment you understand something deeply, your choices begin to change. And your choices shape your life. If you understand that time is valuable, you begin to spend it differently. You become more intentional, more aware of what deserves your attention. If you understand that most worries do not matter, you begin to let go of unnecessary stress. You act more freely. You think more clearly. If you understand that relationships are what give life meaning, you begin to invest in them. You become more present, more connected, more appreciative of the people around you. If you understand that you cannot please everyone, you begin to live more authentically. You stop shaping your life based on external approval. You start building it based on internal truth. And if you understand how quickly life moves, you stop waiting for the perfect moment. You begin to act now, not recklessly, but intentionally, because you recognize that the present moment is not something to pass through. It is something to experience. This is the difference between a life that feels rushed and a life that feels meaningful. Not the number of years, but the awareness within those years. Two people can live the same amount of time. One can feel like it passed too quickly, filled with missed opportunities and constant pressure. The other can feel like it was full, rich with experiences, connection, and intention. The difference is not luck. It is awareness. It is the ability to recognize what matters while there is still time to act on it. And this is where a simple but powerful question becomes important. If I continue living the way I am right now, what will my life look like when I look back on it? Not in a distant future, but eventually. Because one day, everyone reaches that moment of reflection. That moment where they pause and look at the life they have lived. And in that moment, the things that matter become very clear. Not the small worries. Not the endless tasks. Not the pressure to meet every expectation. But the time that was spent. The people who were part of it. The experiences that were created. The way life was actually lived. The goal is not to reach that moment and feel regret. The goal is to reach it and feel peace. To know that you lived in alignment with what mattered. To know that you did not spend your life chasing things that never truly fulfilled you. To know that you were present enough to experience the moments that made life meaningful. And the only way to reach that point is to begin now. Not by making drastic changes overnight, but by making small, intentional decisions. Choosing to be present in a conversation instead of distracted. Choosing to take action instead of overthinking. Choosing to express yourself honestly instead of holding back. Choosing to spend time on what matters instead of what feels urgent but empty. These choices may seem small, but over time, they shape everything. They determine how your days are lived. And your days become your life. That is the truth most people eventually realize. That life is not something that happens in big moments alone. It is built in the small ones. In the choices that are made daily. In the attention that is given. In the way time is used. And once you understand that, something changes. Life stops feeling like something you are trying to catch up to, and starts feeling like something you are actually living. So you do not have to wait. You do not have to learn these lessons at the end. You can understand them now. And if you do, your life may not just be longer in years. It may feel fuller in meaning. Because the most powerful moment in life is not when everything is perfect. It is when you realize what truly matters. And choose to live that way while you still have the time to do it.